Which, there it is. Boom. Tortuga Masamune, Brown Bear, Enigma Giant, Russian Gudo Warog. That is the name of our tribe. It's not a big deal. Just memorize it all.
Your niche is very, very cool. I am like the idea of here's a Christian who like reviews things that are lovely and are enjoyable. You know, like you enjoy food and drink, and I think a lot of Christians kind of see those things as worldly. You know what I mean? They just, oh, it's I'm above all that. Like I'm spiritual. And it was kind of refreshing to see like this Christian guy who like is super like orthodox, but it is almost because of his orthodoxy that causes him to go, hey, let's like enjoy things.
So. So, G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy, it's not copyrighted. It was written in 1908. This particular edition is from Canon Press. It's part of their Christian Heritage series. It's a great series. I'm going to be reviewing a bunch of books from it. There's sort of a visual theme to all the covers. Like they work together, they belong together. If a man says that extinction is better than existence, or blank existence better than variety and adventure, then he is not one of the ordinary people to whom I am talking. If a man prefers nothing, I can give him nothing. But nearly all people I have ever met in this Western society in which I live would agree to the general proposition that we need this life of practical romance, the combination of something that is strange with something that is secure. We need so to view the world as to combine an idea of wonder and an idea of welcome. We need to be happy in this wonderland without once being merely comfortable. It is this achievement of my creed that I shall chiefly pursue in these pages. Thoroughly worldly people never understand even the world. They rely altogether on a few cynical maxims which are not true. Once I remember walking with a prosperous publisher who made a remark which I had often heard before. It is, indeed, almost a motto of the modern world. Yet I had heard it once too often, and I saw suddenly that there was nothing in it. The publisher said of somebody, "That man will get on. He believes in himself." And I remember that as I lifted my head to listen, my eye caught an omnibus on which was written, Hanwell. I said to him, "Shall I tell you where the men are who believed most in themselves? For I can tell you, I know of men who believe in themselves more colossally than Napoleon or Caesar. I know where flames the fixed star of certainty and success. I can guide you to the thrones of supermen. The men who really believe in themselves are all in lunatic asylums." He said mildly that there were a good many men, after all, who believed in themselves and who were not in lunatic asylums. "Yes, there are," I retorted, "and you of all men ought to know them. That drunken poet from whom you would not take a dreary tragedy, he believed in himself. That elderly minister with an epic from whom you were hiding in a back room, he believed in himself. If you consulted your business experience instead of your ugly individualistic philosophy, you would know that believing in himself is one of the commonest signs of a rotter. Actors who can't act believe in themselves, and debtors who won't pay. It would be much truer to say that a man will certainly fail because he believes in himself. Complete self-confidence is not merely a sin. Complete self-confidence is a weakness. Believing utterly in oneself is a hysterical and superstitious belief, like believing in Joanna Southcote. The man who has Hanwell written on his face, as plain as it is written in that omnibus. And I have no idea what those references refer to. And to all this, my friend the publisher made this very deep and effective reply. Well, if a man is not to believe in himself, in what is he to believe? After a long pause, I replied, I will go home and write a book in answer to that question. This is the book that I have written in answer to it. I love that the book already has 2 origin stories. All right. But I think this book may well start where our argument started, in the neighborhood of the madhouse. Modern masters of science are much impressed with the need of beginning all inquiry with a fact. The ancient masters of religion were quite equally impressed with that necessity. They began with the fact of sin, a fact as practical as potatoes. Whether or no, this is an unusual phrasing in current English and it tripped me up. Whether or no man could be washed in miraculous waters, there was no doubt at any rate that he wanted washing. But certain religious leaders in London, not mere materialists, have begun in our day not to deny the highly disputable water, but to deny the indisputable dirt. Certain new theologians dispute original sin, which is the only part of Christian theology which can really be proved. What book are you reading? I am reading G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy. It's sort of so this was written in 1908. G.K. Chesterton was just an amazing essayist and journalist, book writer. And it's, how should I say, a testimony of his Christian faith, but it's like an apologetics through aesthetics. He approaches things through the lens of beauty. And so, yeah, it's this whole book is about his personal journey to faith, but in a broad, appealing way. And it's not. It's about it's his thoughts, not the things that actually happened to him. So there you go. And he's hilarious. He's absolutely amazing. Yeah, nice. Similarly, even the wildest poetry of insanity can only be enjoyed by the sane. To the insane man, his insanity is quite prosaic, because it is quite true. A man who thinks himself a chicken is to himself as ordinary as a chicken. But yeah, YouTube videos will still go up occasionally. That's where I'll post reviews and stuff. And the reason for that is often I review stuff that I'd like the makers of that thing to be blessed. So I will, I do have kind of a wider reach on YouTube, but also if I put something on YouTube, the people who make whatever it is I'm reviewing can share that more broadly. All right, so I'll do reviews and stuff on YouTube, but all the community stuff, like the stuff where we get to talk, is moving. Mm-hmm. Right. It would depend on how you define relish. Somebody should look it up and post whatever the definition says so we can really argue about that. I wouldn't call sauerkraut a relish, but it would depend on how you define it. I definitely don't limit it to pickle, though. All right. I've got my book. I've got my scotch. I've got you guys. Let's resume. Dex, hard choice, coffee or whiskey? Yes. Yeah, well, I'm going with the whiskey because I'm out of coffee, but I was really more thinking, like, I just ate 2 hot dogs and some chips. I need something to wash it down, you know. The Fuki. Peace for peace's sake is not peace. Diversity for diversity's sake isn't true diversity. No, that's right. In fact, we're finding that diversity for diversity's sake is creating a homogenous culture. Yeah. Yeah, it's that, men who cry out peace, peace when there is no peace. They are listed among the worst in the prophets. Peace, peace. All right. So, we've been talking about insanity and how an ordinary boy is who adventures should happen to, right? So, the fairy tales are of enduring interest because, like The Hobbit, right, there's an ordinary hero who has extraordinary adventures. And the modern paradigm is to have an extraordinary hero, and the world is what's dull around him. And that actually is, that's the crisis of modern and postmodern man, right? That his ego is great and the world is meaningless. Now, if we are to glance at the philosophy of sanity, the first thing to do in the matter is to blot out one big and common mistake. There is a notion adrift everywhere that imagination, especially mystical imagination, is dangerous to man's mental balance. Poets are commonly spoken of as psychologically unreliable, and generally there is a vague association between wreathing laurels in your hair and sticking straws in it. Facts and history utterly contradict this view. Most of the very great poets have been not only sane but extremely businesslike. And if Shakespeare ever really held horses, it was because he was much the safest man to hold them. Imagination does not breed insanity. Exactly what does breed insanity is reason. Poets do not go mad, but chess players do. Mathematicians go mad, and cashiers, but creative artists very seldom. I am not, as will be seen, in any sense attacking logic. I only say that this danger does lie in logic, not in imagination. Artistic paternity is as wholesome as physical paternity. Moreover, it is worthy of remark that when a poet really was morbid, it was commonly because he had some weak spot of rationality on his brain. And that, I think, is why musicians go mad. Because musicians are the most rationalistic of artists, right? They are artists of math. Poe, for instance, really was morbid. Not because he was poetical, but because he was specially analytical. Even chess was too poetical for him. He disliked chess because it was full of knights and castles, like a poem. He avowedly preferred the black discs of drafts, checkers, because they were more like the mere black dots on a diagram. Perhaps the strongest case of all is this, that only one great English poet went mad, Cowper. And he was definitely driven mad by logic, by the ugly and alien logic of predestination. This is one of the places where Chesterton gets anti-Calvinist. He is very much anti-Calvinist. He's a papist, and he's thinking of a particular brand of Scottish Calvinism. The preface to this edition is actually N.D. Wilson talking about a Calvinistic Chestertonianism. His stuff about Calvinists is definitely like paper tiger type stuff. It is always perilous to the mind to reckon up the mind. Yow! So spicy. A flippant person has asked why we say as mad as a hatter. A more flippant person might answer that a hatter is mad because he has to measure the human head. E. Michael, when I see the connection that math can make, I find it easy to get carried away. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, one should have fun exploring that stuff, but always with a poetic imagination, I think. I think Chesterton's right. That's the thing that keeps us sane. And by poetic imagination here, I mean being comfortable with paradox. Paradox is not contradiction. Paradox is the point that we reach in which we ourselves can't reconcile the truths that we observe, but they don't contradict. So the poetic imagination is comfortable when things aren't resolved, right? But logic can't stand that. It must resolve it all the way. If you insist on resolving everything all the way, you will if you get carried away into that, you will go insane, right? You have to be satisfied with being finite. You have to be satisfied with getting your head into the heavens and not the heavens into your head. Easy to see how a mathematician's head could crack under the strain. Exactly. Young wife, what are you up to?
Sorry.
Are you changing out of your sexy boots and putting on your sexy tennis shoes? Don't say sexy in front of them?
Will you stop it?
Sure. A man cannot think himself out of mental evil, for it is actually the organ of thought that has become diseased, ungovernable, and, as it were, independent. He can only be saved by will or faith. The moment his mere reason moves, it moves in the old circular rut. He will go round and round his logical circle, just as a man in a third-class carriage on the inner circle will go round and round the inner circle, unless he performs the voluntary, vigorous, and mystical act of getting out at Gower Street. Decision is the whole business here. A door must be shut forever. Every remedy is a desperate remedy. Every cure is a miraculous cure. Curing a madman is not arguing with a philosopher. It is casting out a devil. That's so good. One of the apologists of my acquaintance starts his discussion with, so I can punch you in the face, right? Yeah. So, You should read Cookie Mama, N.D. Wilson. Actually, N.D. Wilson wrote the intro to this edition. N.D. Wilson's Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl. But yeah, he tells a similar. He's actually done that as well, and he tells one of those stories in that book. He literally took a dude's sandwich in the middle of an argument. But there is such a thing as a mean infinity, a base and slavish eternity. It is amusing to notice that many of the moderns, whether skeptics or mystics, have taken as their sign a certain Eastern symbol, which is the very symbol of this ultimate nullity. Oh, this part's so good. When they wish to represent eternity, they represent it by a serpent with its tail in its mouth. There is a startling sarcasm in the image of that very unsatisfactory meal. The eternity of the material fatalists, the eternity of the Eastern pessimists, the eternity of the supercilious theosophists and higher scientists of today is, indeed, very well presented by a serpent eating his tail, a degraded animal who destroys even himself. This chapter is purely practical and is concerned with what actually is the chief mark and element of insanity. We may say in summary that it is reason used without root, reason in the void. The man who begins to think without the proper first principles goes mad. He begins to think at the wrong end. And for the rest of these pages, we have to try and discover what is the right end. But we may ask in conclusion, if this be what drives men mad, what is it that keeps them sane? By the end of this book, I hope to give a definite, some will think a far too definite answer. But for the moment, it is possible in the same solely practical manner to give a general answer touching what in actual human history keeps men sane. Mysticism keeps men sane. As long as you have mystery, you have health. Was it Cookie who said something about that? As long as you have mystery, you have health. When you destroy mystery, you create morbidity. The ordinary man has always been sane because the ordinary man has always been a mystic. He has permitted the twilight. He has always had one foot in earth and the other in fairyland. He has always left himself free to doubt his gods, but unlike the agnostic of today, free also to believe in them. He has always cared more for truth than for consistency. If he saw two truths that seemed to contradict each other, he would take the two truths and the contradiction along with them. His spiritual sight is stereoscopic, like his physical sight. He sees two different pictures at once and yet sees all the better for that. Thus he has always believed that there was such a thing as fate, but such a thing as free will also. Thus he believed that children were indeed the kingdom of heaven, but nevertheless ought to be obedient to the kingdom of earth. He admired youth because it was young and age because it was not. It is exactly this balance of apparent contradiction that has been the whole buoyancy of the healthy man. The whole secret of mysticism is this, that man can understand everything by the help of what he does not understand. The morbid logician seeks to make everything lucid and succeeds in making everything mysterious. The mystic allows one thing to be mysterious and everything else becomes lucid. Of necessary dogmas and a special creed I shall speak later. But that transcendentalism by which all men live has primarily much the position of the sun in the sky. We are conscious of it as of a kind of splendid confusion. It is something both shining and shapeless, at once a blaze and a blur. But the circle of the moon is as clear and unmistakable, as recurrent and inevitable as the circle of Euclid on a blackboard. For the moon is utterly reasonable, and the moon is the mother of lunatics, and has given to them all her name. Wow. So chapter 3 is the suicide of thought. We'll do that on another day. And then after that is my favorite chapter, the ethics of Elfland. Thanks, guys, for being here. Great conversation. I'm looking forward to the next time. We'll probably do the same thing. Just do a little Chesterton. And we are out. So long, everybody. Raid time. Peace be upon you. The peace of Christ be upon you.